Sweet 16 Thursday night, the opening night of the second weekend of the 2024 Men's NCAA Tournament. A recap live right here on this Friday morning on the early line. We start with the national championship game rematch, the opening game of the night inside TD Garden. So Donnie Rightside was up and watching, and it was another blowout and dominant performance out of the reigning national champs, the Connecticut Huskies. The one seed in the East region rolls to a 30-point blowout win over San Diego State. Last year's national runner-ups see a similar fate to what they saw last year in the national title game in Houston. UConn was a pregame 11.5-point favorite. They had no trouble covering that line. It was the largest spread of the Sweet 16 in any of the 8 games. It was the only one in double digits, and yet again, Connecticut covers the line. DRS 9 wins for UConn in their last 2 trips now to the NCAA tournament. 6 games last year, ending in a national title. 3 games so far this year that have led Connecticut into the Elite 8. They are a perfect 9-0 against the spread, covering by an average margin of 13.5 points per game. Just their average margin of victory for Dan Hurley's Huskies is nearly 23 points per game. Dominance doesn't even really begin to describe what the Huskies are doing in the big dance.
No, it doesn't. And there's an old saying that goes, if you're scared, get a dog. Ben, I have 2 dogs, and I'm still scared to death of the UConn Huskies blasting away in this tournament and knocking down one of my futures one by one. So I still have 2 futures left in here, but the whole point of me not betting UConn was somebody help me out, Ben, and knock off the UConn Huskies. We knew it was their advantage, right? We knew it all along. You're going to come in, you're going to pick the region. We want to be in the East, which meant, again, you're going to be playing in that regional games against higher level competition, but basically in your home gym, as you saw last night. And even though San Diego State opened this game like, hey, we're game for this. We have an early lead. I'm like, ooh, this could be a good one. You just see the talent level come at you in waves from UConn. They do everything great. Defense, offense, 3-point shooting, take care of the basketball, don't foul. It's unbelievable how they hit you because San Diego State is a very good basketball team. They want to slow it down and play the same pace as you do, but somehow against a top 10 efficient defense in the country, UConn still walks to 82 points here. It's amazing. Now, we'll talk about who they're going to match up with next round, which I think is going to be so much fun to watch. But right now, if anybody's been watching UConn over the past, let's just even say month and a half, like, you know what? They're really vulnerable. They can get beat. You're just praying on it. And what I'm doing, Ben, I'm praying on somebody might be able to play a perfect game against UConn. Not even to beat them, just to hang on down the final 2-3 minutes of the game.
Maybe just cover a number at this point. Again, Connecticut is a perfect 9-0 against the spread. They have won their 9 games, of course, then outright, all 9 by at least 13 points, with an average margin of victory of 22.8 points per game. This was the national championship game rematch where San Diego State lost by 17 in the title game a year ago and got blown out by even more last night inside TD Garden and in Boston. And Donnie, when you look at Connecticut, I think you brought up a great point. How do you beat this UConn team? I'm not sure you can. There is a team out there that might be able to keep pace. I don't know what that team looks like. I don't know what their matchup advantage is, if any. I don't know what the game plan would be to beat UConn. Could it happen in the Elite 8, in the Final 4, in a national championship game? Sure. Would I predict it and tell you this is the time the Huskies get stopped? Not at this moment. When you look at the balanced scoring effort last night out of the starting lineup for Dan Hurley's Huskies, Cam Spencer, the Rutgers transfer, 18 points to lead the way. Tristan Newton, 17 points, 7 boards, 4 assists. He does it all. Even Steph Castle, the young freshman, 16 points and 11 rebounds. UConn easily covers as an 11.5-point favorite. San Diego State only scored 21 points in the final 20 minutes in that second half. Pre-game total of 137 and a hook. Did stay under. UConn, by the way, under in all 3 of its games so far in the big dance. Now we go to the nightcap in Boston, where UConn was awaiting to see who would win that basketball game, and they could start the early scout. Inside TD Garden, it was the game of the night in our estimation, DRS, and it lived up to the hype in terms of how competitive the game was going to be. The best offense in the country, Illinois, against the best defense in the country, Iowa State. The Cyclones closed as a very short 1.5 favorite. 10 cents of difference, DRS, on the money line. Minus 115 for the Cyclones. Minus 105 on the other side for the Illini. Pre-game total, 146.5. It wasn't really the offense that won the day for Illinois. It was a really good defensive performance against Iowa State. Total stays under 146.5, and Illinois wins outright, 72-69. The Illini keep dancing in the Elite Eight for the first time since 2005. This is their first trip to the second weekend since 2005. They keep it rolling now to an Elite Eight appearance against UConn.
Most efficient offense versus the most efficient defense yesterday. Wanted to see how that would play out, and quite frankly, we probably expected a game that was going to be decided either way by 3, 4, or 5 points. It's a nice win for the Illini here because you are on the road. You are taking on a great defense here, and you're expecting your shots to go down. They weren't wonderful, Ben, on offense. 42% as a team, 31% from the three-point line, and in a close game, if you would have told me before, they're going to shoot 15 of 29 from the free throw line, they probably get beat in this game. Now, good for Illinois. They got up to that double-digit lead, but in the second half, Iowa State closed that gap to within 2 points, but just couldn't come any closer to tie it up or get that momentum to get over the top. Because as you know, you use all that gas and energy just trying to get back into the basketball game where that final hurdle is tying it or taking the lead. They weren't able to do that here. It was a great game all the way through to watch it play out, but you need superstars to come up big at this time of year. And you take a look at Shannon Jr., 10 of 19 from the floor, 4 of 10 from three-point range. Didn't have a great night, as you already pointed out, from the free throw line, but 29 points against an elite defense. That's something here. This offense is very, very good, and I look forward to them taking on UConn. Should be a competitive game, even if the odds makers don't think so.
Terrence Shannon Jr. also in foul trouble for a good portion of that second half and still ends with 29 points where he was 5 of 10 from the charity stripe. He still is the first Illini player in that program's history to score 25 or more points in 3 consecutive NCAA tournament games. He had 30 against Duquesne over the weekend in the round of 32. He had 26 in the opener against Morehead State. Terrence Shannon Jr. making history for Illinois. Again, they were 15 of 29 from the free throw line as a team. That's less than 52% as a team. If they hit 5 or 6 more free throws, this game might have been out of hand at certain points and definitely down the stretch, but the Cyclones keep it tight. Illinois this year, though, as an underdog, now 5-2 against the spread. They have won 4 of those games outright. It did snap a 5-game over streak for the most efficient offense in the country, just the 3rd under for the Illini in their last 18 games. So now we set the stage for Saturday night. It is the opener in Boston. It will tip just after 6 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow inside TD Garden. It's the 1 seed in the reigning national champs, Connecticut, against the 3 seed in the East region, Illinois. And it's an 8.5-point spread in favor of Dan Hurley's Huskies. Again, those odds makers, DRS, they believe in Connecticut, and frankly, who could fault them?
No, exactly. It's basically a home game as well. I love what I've seen out of Illinois, but it just seems like you have to play that perfect game. Now, granted, you're going to go from an Illinois team that's gaining momentum and just knocked off the number 1 overall defensive team in the country. So they're not coming in saying, I don't think we can win this basketball game. I hope we can play it close. That's not how it works here. But this is probably the game of the weekend now that we're looking forward to. The atmosphere is going to be sensational from a UConn side because that place is going to be rocking to send them off into the Final Four if they can win that game. I was a little bit surprised, to be honest, to see the FanDuel Sportsbook post that 8.5-point number because I do think it's strong. But then again, is anybody going like, yeah, man, everybody covers against UConn. UConn only wins close and blows games late. That's not the case here, but that'll be interesting to see where that line actually ends up and which side the public is actually betting by the time we get to game time.
We now have the shortest price on UConn to go back-to-back that we have seen at any juncture of the NCAA tournament, really any point of this college basketball season. Look at it. Plus 120 for Dan Hurley's Huskies. Less than half of the rest of the field, less than a third of the rest of the field at this moment. More around Sweet 16 Thursday night next. Sweet 16 Thursday night, a recap here on this Friday morning on the early line on SportsGrid. What a game it was in the nightcap in the West region. The 1-4 matchup in the round of 16 in Los Angeles. We saw underdogs win outright in a big way in the city of Angels. The nightcap between Alabama and North Carolina. UNC, the number 1 seed in this portion of the bracket, against the team on the 4 line in the Crimson Tide. Line closed at 4.5 points in favor of UNC. The largest total we had seen in the Big Dance in more than 2 decades at 174 and a hook. Total went over. Alabama kept pace all night long. Alabama wins outright and advances to their first Elite Eight appearance since 2004, 20 years ago. 89-87, the Crimson Tide knock off North Carolina and win outright as a 4.5-point underdog.
Game is simple to me here. When your best players don't perform at a level capable, and even not even playing at an average level, you're probably going to get beat against elite competition. Now, we knew Alabama's very talented coming into this basketball game, but over the season, what was the thought process behind Alabama? Yeah, they're a fun team to bet and watch because they scored a lot of points, but they don't defend anybody. Yeah. And I brought up the game yesterday, 2 games, I should say, coming down the stretch against the Florida Gators, which Alabama had played in the SEC and also in the SEC tournament. Gave up 100 points both times and lost both of those games. I figured, said to myself, I like Florida, but North Carolina is a better version of Florida. Can get up and down the court, play tempo, and has a much, much better defense than Florida had. Didn't matter last night. Why? Because RJ Davis played 38 minutes and shot 4 of 20 from the field, which, as you pointed out, Ben, 0 of 9 from three-point range. You just give me average RJ Davis. Hey, by the way, Donnie, he's going to shoot 9 three-point shots, going to shoot 20 times total from the field. Oh, that's at least 10 of 20. Knock down a couple triples here, gets to the free throw line, and away UNC goes. Yeah. You're not going to win basketball games when your best player comes up lame in the biggest moments here, and that's what happened. But also, credit Alabama, because as we talked about throughout this week, there was no team more bet on for this weekend's games in the Sweet 16 than North Carolina. 9 out of every 10 tickets coming on, and the line wasn't moving all that much in that direction, and rightfully so. But how about this, though, Ben? 54-46 at the break for UNC. That's a game you got to have. You blew it in the second half, and your biggest players just didn't step up.
Yeah, they certainly did not. RJ Davis, 4 of 20, as DRS mentioned, 0 of 9 from beyond the arc. Cormac Ryan hit 5 triples. Harrison Ingram was 2 of 6. Armando Bacot ends his North Carolina career with another double-double, 19 points, 12 boards. But when your All-American guard in RJ Davis goes 0 from deep, 0 for 9, that is not a recipe for success. And when Alabama on the other side, DRS, can control the pace and the tempo of the game, shoot 26 threes and make 11 of them, North Carolina did not do a great job defensively running Alabama off that three-point line and confusing what Nate Oates' Crimson Tide team wants to do. We talked about that total. The reason I did not bet the under last night, and thankfully so, was because North Carolina, also one of the 45 fastest tempos in college basketball, and North Carolina against elite offenses likes to keep pace and obviously can match them score for score even when their best player goes 0 from deep. But if you want to beat Alabama, you confuse them offensively. You run them off the three-point line. You make their offensive sets slow down and in that half-court pace. That was not the case for North Carolina last night. I thought the game stayed under. North Carolina won. Game stayed over, and Alabama victorious. Into the Elite Eight for the first time in 20 years. Rylan Griffin, 5 triples last night for the Crimson Tide. The 2 transfers, Mark Sears Jr., Aaron Estrada, 19 points, 18 points, and then Grant Nelson, the transfer from North Dakota State University in his big game as a member of the Tide. 24 points, 12 rebounds, 5 blocks, 6 of 9 from the floor, 2 of 2 from deep, 10 of 13 from the charity stripe. That is a recipe for success. That is one of the all-time tournament performances we have seen on the men's side that Grant Nelson pulled off last night against North Carolina.
Great performance. You take a look at the starting lineup. Outside of Pringle, played 19 minutes, only had 2 points. Ben, look at this. 24 points out of Nelson, 18 from Sears. Griffin had 19, and also Estrada had 19. When you get into a high-scoring tempo game, you can't just rely on one guy. And it seemed like we're looking at North Carolina relying on only one guy to do the scoring from the outside. And you even pointed out as well, Cormac Ryan was great from three-point range. You tell me before the game he's knocking down 5 triples, and I get an average performance out of RJ Davis. That's a North Carolina win. But you still have to give credit to Alabama. One of those teams, again, comes in from the SEC, which I thought was a great conference in the regular season. But the lacking part we always think is your offense can only carry you so far. You do have tempo here, but you got to play some defense, which, as you brought up also, you take the tempo for North Carolina this season was very good, but they also played very good defense. It should have been a perfect matchup for North Carolina to escape with a victory because you weren't contrasting styles. You're basically saying we're both really talented, but one side plays defense while both plays really good offense. And the standout here was the Alabama Crimson Tide holding off. But this is also what you get, Ben. Two teams relative to the East Coast playing on the West Coast, time differences, new arena. Some of these things catch up to you. And we always talk about this as well. NCAA tournament's one game. Look, R.J. Davis would probably go back. He's going to look at this game for the rest of his life and say, my goodness, man, I wish I could just get back out there one more game against Alabama or a 3-game series. I know this would be different, but this is the reason why it's so hard to win championships in March Madness. Every game, you have to be basically perfect to continue to advance. North Carolina wasn't yesterday.
The Tar Heels end their year going over in 6 of their last 7 games. Alabama now over in 12 of its last 14. Alabama entered last night, DRS, playing 6 fellow Sweet 16 teams throughout this season. A couple in SEC play, of course, in Tennessee, and a ton of the non-conference. They were 0-6 straight up against those Sweet 16 foes. As an underdog entering last night, Alabama just 1-7 straight up, 2-6 against the spread, make that 2 outright victories. 9 games now as a dog and 3-6 against the number. So Alabama wins outright as an underdog in the nightcap in Los Angeles. In the opening game of the Sweet 16, an underdog prevailed outright as well. It's been the story for Clemson here in this big dance. They continue to be booked as the team getting points pregame, and they continue to win outright. Clemson knocks off Arizona 77-72. The Tigers win outright as a 6.5-point underdog. Pregame total of 153.5 does stay under. It's the story of the NCAA tournament for Clemson, DRS. Back in their first Elite Eight since 1980, just the second ever in Clemson program history. But it's also the story of the entire season for Brad Brownell's Tigers. They are now 9-1 against the number as an underdog this year. 7 outright victories in those 10 games as a dog, as Clemson advances to the Elite Eight.
You were waiting for a run, right, from Arizona, but you take a look at the game flow here. Clemson controlled it all the way through. It wasn't like, hey, let's see if Clemson can steal another basketball game. They were the better team. Had a lot of mirrored images to going up against Baylor. You say, look, I'm going to dare you to shoot the three-point shot. You want to shoot the three-point shot, not make it, we're going to be able to beat you because, quite frankly, you look at Clemson as a team, Ben. They don't have that one true superstar on their basketball team.
Right.
They also, you take a look at the numbers. All right, solid on offense, solid on defense, nothing spectacular. We came into that game yesterday going, look at Arizona, top 10 in efficiency on offense, top 10 in efficiency on defense. They just have to roll the basketball out there. They should be able to handle Clemson. But many teams have thought that here in the ACC tournament / NCAA March Madness. It's Clemson, man. It's the ACC. Yeah. It's a little bit of a down season. 6 seed. Should be able to maybe win a game if they're lucky. When a lot of people had them getting bounced in round 1, getting upset from an 11 seed, and that didn't happen. So I love the fact that it's almost like us against the world mentality right now for Clemson. But just getting back to the ball game, you just have to play average basketball sometimes when you're the better team, Ben, and you can win. You look at Arizona from the field, 37%, not good enough. And again, we're talking about a team that's one of the top 10 teams in the country in efficiency on offense. 5 of 28 from three-point range, 18%. Get to the free throw line, only make 68% of your free throws here. And also, sort of like UConn, you weren't on your home court, but you in your home region where the crowd was on your side, and it still didn't make up for that. That's an unbelievable performance by Clemson, who we joked about yesterday. You know, how many people are actually going to be in the stands to watch them play compared to Arizona? Boy, they were the better team all the way through, and they're advancing into the Elite Eight, something I didn't see coming.
Me, neither. North Carolina ended up losing last night, but Clemson did at least clinch for the ACC, one berth into the Elite Eight for 22 consecutive NCAA tournaments now. The next longest conference streak is 13. So the ACC's demise was maybe a little bit premature, even though North Carolina, the 1 seed in the West region, was upset late last night in L.A. Now, that's Clemson, and we'll look at the West Regional Final between the Tigers and the Crimson Tide, a very familiar pairing of 2 schools in college basketball in just a moment. But if we go back to Arizona, 3 years now under Tommy Lloyd, who was the longtime Mark Few assistant up in Spokane at Gonzaga. Arizona has been an 88-20 basketball team in those 3 years. 88 wins, a win percentage of .815. Very few better than the Cats in the regular season. They've been a 1 seed and a 2 seed twice under Tommy Lloyd, and they have been bounced before the Elite Eight each and every trip, all 3 to the NCAA tournament, and by a seed line that was at least 5 spots less. That is a struggle for Arizona. So now we look at the West Regional bracket, where at the end of the day, Donnie, the 2 seed Arizona, who had a better price to win a title and reach the Final Four, out. Even than the 1 seed North Carolina, who is now out as well. And Alabama opens as a 3.5-point favorite for the Elite Eight in Los Angeles. Our nightcap tomorrow night, the total 164.5. We'll look at those games a little bit later on in our third hour. But it's not a great matchup for a Clemson team that lets their opponent shoot the 3. If Alabama is even average or proficient, it could be
Sears
the
Tower
Crimson Tide into the Final Four. We're back here on the early line of the second.